911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am? And your phone number? Okay. Has she been missing before?
No. She had a fight with her girlfriend. She decided to walk home, and we can turn around about an hour and a half. And it's not an hour and a half walking. God, we can't find her anywhere. I called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
And when was the last time that she was seen?
It was at 6 o'clock, Steve. Around 6 o'clock.
And she was at a friend's house?
Yeah.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carlie, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia. It's very fussy.
Okay. You know how much she weighs?
Never 120 pounds.
Okay, what color hair does she have?
30 blonde.
And what color eye?
Blue.
It was February 1st, 2004, in Sarasota, Florida. The city, known for its quiet suburban life, was about to witness a case so horrifying that it would haunt the community for years to come. The missing child's name was Carlie Brucia, an innocent, bright-eyed girl who had simply been walking home. But what should have been an ordinary evening turned into a parent's worst nightmare. What made this case even more terrifying was that, unlike most disappearances, Carlie's abduction wasn't just suspected, it was caught on camera. A grainy yet unmistakable surveillance video would soon reveal the chilling moment a stranger walked up to her, grabbed her arm, and led her away. Despite the quick response from her parents and authorities, time was slipping away, and the more hours that passed, the darker the reality became. The search was on, but little did they know. The answer they were looking for was already recorded in a few seconds of horrifying footage. As the police scrambled to piece together what had happened, Carlie's family was about to uncover a truth more disturbing than they ever imagined. The sun was setting over Sarasota as Carlie Brucia walked away from her friend's house, unaware that danger lurked just around the corner. It was Super Bowl Sunday, and she was eager to get home in time to watch the game. Her friend's mother had offered to drive her, but Carlie insisted that she was allowed to walk. It was a route she had taken many times before, a short, familiar stretch through a quiet neighborhood. But what seemed like an ordinary decision would turn into a catastrophic mistake. Shortly after Carlie left, her friend's mother felt uneasy. Something just didn't sit right. Acting on instinct, she called Carlie's mother, Susan, and informed her that Carlie was walking home alone. The moment Susan heard this, panic set in. Carlie was only 11. Walking alone, even for a short distance, was never the plan. Without wasting a second, Susan turned to her husband and Carlie's stepfather, Steve Kanzler. Steve grabbed his keys and drove the route Carlie would have taken, scanning the sidewalks, calling her name. But with every passing block, the dread inside him grew. She wasn't there. At first, he tried to reason with himself. Maybe she had taken a different path. Maybe she had already made it home. But when he returned to the house and found no sign of Carlie, reality crashed down on him. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Without hesitation, Susan and Steve rushed back out, desperately searching the streets, yelling Carlie's name out the car window. They stopped near a wooded area, hoping they would find her. But instead, something else caught their attention. A red tow truck. It slowed as it passed them, moving eerily, almost as if the driver was watching them. Then, as they reached Carlie's friend's house to check again, they saw it. The same red truck, now parked outside. A cold chill ran down Susan's spine. Something was very, very wrong. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone and dialed. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. Carlie had only been gone for a short time, but in cases like these, every second mattered. The police were now involved, the search was intensifying, and the city of Sarasota was about to become the center of a terrifying mystery. But what no one knew yet, what no one could have imagined, was that the answer to this nightmare had already been recorded, waiting to be discovered. The Sarasota Police Department wasted no time. Within minutes of Susan's frantic 911 call, officers were dispatched to the scene. The initial assumption was that Carlie had either gotten lost or, worst-case scenario, been taken by someone she knew. But as the minutes stretched into hours with no sign of her, that hope quickly faded. Authorities immediately issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, alert for Carlie, describing her as an 11-year-old girl, 5 feet tall, weighing around 80 pounds, with shoulder-length blonde hair, last seen wearing a pink shirt and blue jeans. Flyers were printed and distributed across the neighborhood, while search teams combed the area, calling out her name. As police began questioning Carlie's family and friends, something odd surfaced. Steve Kanzler, Carlie's stepfather, had been the first one to go looking for her. But later that night, he reportedly stopped at an equipment rental shop, not just to hand out missing persons flyers, but to ask an employee where he could buy drugs after this whole thing blows over. It was a bizarre thing to say for a man whose stepdaughter had just disappeared. The employee, suspicious of Steve's behavior, immediately reported this to the police. Detectives brought him in for questioning. Was his worry for Carlie genuine? Or was he trying to shift suspicion away from himself? Under pressure, Steve explained his movements that evening.
And Susan says, "Hey, can you go pick up Carlie?" She started walking down Beer Ridge. And I just said, "Where's she at?" And she goes, "Connie's." I said, "That's the one over here." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'm leaving right now." And out the door I went. Okay.
He insisted he had been home with Susan the entire time before leaving to search for Carlie. His alibi checked out as Susan confirmed his whereabouts. The police, after verifying his story, ruled him out as a suspect. But Steve did have one important lead to offer: the red tow truck. He recalled seeing it circling the neighborhood during their search and later found it parked outside Carlie's friend's house. The truck belonged to a man named Ron Shokit, who had been dating the mother of Carlie's friend for about 2 months. That meant he had been at the house the night before Carlie disappeared, and at one point, he was the only adult present. Police immediately tracked Ron down. When questioned, he denied any involvement and stated that he had already left for work before Carlie left the house. His co-workers confirmed his alibi, leaving detectives at a dead end. But something still didn't sit right. Carlie's mother was adamant her daughter would never run away. But a close friend of Carlie's told a different story. According to her, Carlie had been upset the night before, complaining about her family and responsibilities. She allegedly even said that she didn't want to go home. For a moment, detectives considered the possibility. Could this be a case of a runaway rather than an abduction? Still, something about it didn't feel right. Before leaving, police gave Susan one chilling instruction: save Carlie's dental records, just in case we need to make an identification. It was a statement no mother ever wants to hear. The search intensified, but the police still had no solid leads. That is, until the next morning, when investigators stumbled upon a shocking discovery. Carlie's disappearance had been caught on camera. As the desperate search for Carlie Brucia continued, investigators expanded their efforts, questioning residents and searching every possible route she could have taken. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected place: a nearby car wash. A team of officers visited Eve's Car Wash, a business located along Carlie's walking route. The building had multiple surveillance cameras, one of which faced the exact spot where she would have walked. When the manager reviewed the footage, he froze. There, at 6:30 p.m., the camera captured the last known moments of Carlie Brucia. The video was chilling. Carlie was walking alone, heading towards home. Then, from the left side of the frame, a man appeared. At first, he walked casually, as if he were simply passing by. But at the last second, he took a large step toward Carlie and grabbed her arm. The man blocked her path, standing directly in front of her. His posture was dominant, intimidating. She didn't run. She didn't scream. It was as if she froze in fear. The grainy footage revealed chilling details. The suspect was a white male, average height, dark hair, and tattoos on his forearms. He was wearing a jumpsuit, the kind mechanics often wear. There was a name tag on his uniform, but the video wasn't clear enough to read it. Carlie didn't appear to know him. The way he moved into her path, the way she hesitated, it was clear that this was no friendly encounter. Within seconds, the man took control. He leaned in, seemingly whispering something to her. Maybe he was making a promise. "Come with me and everything will be fine." Maybe he was making a threat. "Don't scream or I'll hurt you." Whatever he said, it worked. Carlie walked with him. The man led her out of frame and then she was gone. Her parents were devastated when police showed them the footage. They confirmed that the girl in the video was Carlie. But the biggest question remained: who was the man who took her? The disturbing footage was immediately released to the media, playing on repeat across news stations. Sarasota residents watched in horror as they saw a young girl being led away by an unknown man, never to be seen again. Calls poured into the police department. Hundreds of tips, hundreds of leads. but most of them led nowhere. Hours passed, then a day, then two. The more time went by, the worse the outcome seemed. Then, finally, a breakthrough. Several callers recognized the man. They knew his name. They knew his past. His name was Joseph Smith, and he was far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The Sarasota Police Department had been flooded with hundreds of tips, but one name kept coming up again and again: Joseph Smith. He was 37 years old, an auto mechanic, and had a lengthy criminal history dating back to 1993. But his past offenses weren't just minor infractions. They included drug abuse, violent assaults, and even kidnapping. One of the most disturbing details: at the time of Carlie Brucia's disappearance, Joseph Smith was out on parole. His record showed a pattern of escalating violence. He had multiple drug-related arrests and was known for heavy narcotics use. He had prior convictions for violent crimes, including kidnapping, aggravated battery, and false imprisonment. Just weeks before Carlie vanished, authorities had requested a warrant for his arrest due to parole violations. But due to paperwork delays, the warrant was never issued. Had the system worked faster, Joseph Smith would have been behind bars. Instead, he was out roaming the streets, waiting for his next victim. One of Joseph's co-workers was among the first to call the police. He had seen the surveillance footage on the news and immediately recognized the way the suspect moved, his mannerisms, and the uniform he wore. Another witness, a fellow mechanic, also contacted authorities, saying that Joseph had seemed extremely nervous at work the day after Carlie went missing. But perhaps the most damning evidence? Joseph drove a yellow station wagon. Investigators went back to the surveillance footage from Eve's car wash and closely examined the cars in the background. Just 3 minutes before Carlie was abducted, a pale yellow Buick station wagon was seen pulling into the parking lot. Did Joseph spot Carlie walking alone and impulsively decide to take her? Or had he been following her from the moment she left her friend's house? Regardless of his motives, police now had a prime suspect. It was time to find him. Detectives drove straight to the home of Joseph's friends, Jeffrey and Naomi Pincus, where he had been staying after his wife kicked him out. As they pulled up to the house, they immediately spotted Joseph outside, smoking a cigarette. But the moment they knocked on the door, Joseph had disappeared. His friends claimed they hadn't seen him. Neighbors, however, said otherwise. One witness recalled seeing Joseph speaking with a woman outside earlier that day. Another insisted that he was still inside the house. The officers refused to leave. They weren't about to let their only suspect slip away. Joseph's sister arrived at the house and went inside to find him. Moments later, Joseph Smith finally stepped out. His demeanor, calm, unbothered. But when police asked him to roll up his sleeves, the truth was undeniable. His forearms were covered in tattoos, exactly like the ones seen on the suspect in the video. Detectives had no doubt. They had their man. But proving his guilt? That was a different challenge altogether. As Joseph Smith stood before the officers, his tattooed forearms were now in plain view. The resemblance to the man in the surveillance footage was undeniable. But despite the growing pressure, Joseph remained calm. When asked where he was at the time of Carlie Brucia's disappearance, he claimed he had an alibi. He told detectives that on the night of February 1st, he had been at home watching the Super Bowl. He insisted that his friends, Jeffrey and Naomi Pincus, could confirm his whereabouts. But there was a problem. Joseph had already been caught in a lie. When officers searched the property, they quickly discovered drug paraphernalia inside his broken-down Lincoln Town car. This was an immediate violation of his parole. Joseph Smith was arrested on the spot. At this point, investigators still didn't have enough to charge him with Carlie's abduction. But they had one clear goal: keep him in custody while they built their case. Once inside the interrogation room, Joseph's body language told its own story. He sat with his arms tightly wrapped around his torso, his legs crossed at the ankles. His entire posture was closed off, as if he was physically trying to protect himself. At first, he refused to talk. When detectives pressed him, he stared at the table, avoiding eye contact. Finally, he muttered, "I was already advised to talk to a lawyer." The interrogation barely had a chance to begin.
I was already advised to talk to a lawyer.
Joseph refused to say anything without legal counsel. But then he made an odd request. "Can I get a cigarette?"
There you go.
Did you say something?
Do you think that I could smoke or no?
It was an unusual moment. A young girl was missing, and yet Joseph seemed more concerned about a cigarette than the case at hand. The detective, unfazed, shook his head. Not right now.
But it is a federal building. It's against the law for you to smoke in here.
I mean, like outside or something.
Not right now.
Joseph smirked. It was the kind of reaction that made the officer's skin crawl. This wasn't a man desperate to prove his innocence. This was a man who knew exactly what he had done. For now, Joseph wasn't talking, but that didn't mean the police had hit a dead end. Hours after his arrest, a new witness walked into the police station. It was one of Joseph's longtime friends. The man had seen the CCTV footage on the news, and the moment he recognized Joseph, he knew he had to speak up. What he told detectives changed everything. Joseph had talked about his fantasies before. According to his friend, Joseph had openly spoken about his growing desire to assault women. It was a chilling revelation, and now, with multiple tips, matching tattoos, and a parole violation holding him in jail, detectives were closer than ever to solving the case. But what happened next would confirm everyone's worst fears. Joseph made a phone call from jail. The person on the other end, his brother, John. And in that conversation, Joseph gave away the truth. For days, police had searched tirelessly, hoping to find Carlie Brucia alive. But on February 5th, 2004, 4 days after she vanished, those hopes were shattered. It all started with a phone call. Joseph Smith, now in custody, had called his brother, John. At first, their conversation seemed ordinary. But then, Joseph said something that made John's blood run cold. "Did you just choke too hard?" John asked. There was a long pause. Then Joseph replied with a single word. "Yes." John's hands trembled as he hung up the phone. His mind raced. He had just heard a confession. His brother had kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered an innocent child. He knew what he had to do. Within minutes, John called the police. He told them that Joseph had admitted to killing Carlie and that he knew where to find her body. A wooded area behind a church, a place just a few miles from Carlie's home. That same evening, officers rushed to the wooded lot behind the Central Church of Christ. The area was dark and eerily quiet, but as they pushed deeper into the trees, a horrifying sight awaited them. Partially hidden in the brush, they found her, the lifeless body of Carlie Brucia. She had been dragged into the woods and left there, discarded like she didn't matter. But she did, to her family, to her community, to everyone following her story, praying for a different ending. An autopsy later confirmed the cause of death, ligature strangulation. Investigators also found signs of brutal assault. Carlie had fought, but against a monster like Joseph Smith, she never stood a chance. If Joseph's own confession to his brother wasn't damning enough, forensic evidence sealed his fate. DNA and hair fibers matching Joseph were found on Carlie's clothing. Her wrist bore marks indicating she had been tied up at some point. Inside the yellow station wagon Joseph had borrowed, police found fibers matching Carlie's pink shirt. Joseph couldn't deny it anymore. Carlie's family was devastated, but they had one small piece of closure. They knew the truth. Now all that was left was justice. The weight of Carlie Brucia's murder hung heavily over Sarasota. The community demanded justice, and prosecutors were determined to deliver it. On October 24, 2005, after months of gathering irrefutable evidence, Joseph Smith stood trial for his crimes. The charges against him were severe: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and battery on a child under 12. Inside the courtroom, Carlie's family sat in silence, their eyes locked onto the man who had stolen their daughter from them. They had to relive the horror, hearing every painful detail of what she had endured. The prosecution wasted no time in proving Joseph's guilt. They played the chilling surveillance footage, showing Carlie being led away by her abductor. Joseph's own brother, John, testified, revealing his jailhouse confession. Forensic experts confirmed that Joseph's DNA was found on Carlie's body and clothing. The station wagon he borrowed contained fibers from Carlie's pink shirt. There was no reasonable doubt. The case against Joseph Smith was airtight. Joseph's attorneys tried to shift the blame onto his drug use. They argued that his heavy addiction to heroin and cocaine had caused him to act without full awareness of his actions. But the jury wasn't convinced. His criminal record told the real story. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Joseph Smith was a career criminal with a history of violence against women. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a decision. Joseph Smith was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery. The prosecution pushed for the death penalty. They argued that Carlie's murder was calculated, cruel, and beyond redemption. By a vote of 10-2, Joseph Smith was sentenced to death for the murder of Carlie Brucia. For years, Joseph sat on death row, awaiting execution. But in 2017, a new Florida law required that death penalty sentences must be unanimous. Since Joseph's jury vote was 10-2, his death sentence was overturned. Carlie's family was outraged. Her mother had fought to ensure that her daughter's killer would never see freedom again. But despite the legal delays, Joseph never escaped justice. In 2021, before his resentencing hearing could take place, Joseph Smith died in prison. He never got to walk free. He never got another chance to hurt anyone. Carlie's murder exposed serious flaws in the justice system. Joseph Smith should have been in jail for previous crimes. His parole violations were ignored, allowing him to remain free. The failure to issue an arrest warrant meant that Carlie's death could have been prevented. Her case led to stricter parole enforcement and tougher sentencing laws for violent offenders. Carlie didn't die in vain. Her story became a wake-up call, a reminder that the justice system must do better. But for her family, no law could ever erase their pain. The tragic story of Carlie Brucia shook the nation. Her murder wasn't just another crime. It was a brutal reminder of how quickly innocence can be stolen. Carlie wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was simply walking home, something every child should be able to do without fear. But that day, evil was waiting for her. Her case changed Florida's laws, highlighting the gaps in the parole system that allowed criminals like Joseph Smith to remain free. The public demanded stricter oversight of parolees. Law enforcement agencies pushed for faster processing of arrest warrants. Carlie's case became a nationwide conversation about child safety and the failures of the justice system. But for Susan Brucia, Carlie's mother, no amount of legal reform could ever bring back her little girl. She once said, "I wake up every day thinking about her, and I go to sleep every night thinking about her. Nothing will ever fill that void." Even though Joseph Smith is dead, the lesson from Carlie's case remains relevant. They blend into everyday life: a mechanic, a neighbor, a friendly stranger. Carlie's story is a reminder that we must stay vigilant. We must protect our children. We must hold the justice system accountable. Carlie Brucia's life was taken too soon, but her story can still save others. If this case struck a chord with you, share it. The more people who know about Carlie, the more we keep her memory alive. And if you know of a case that deserves attention, let us know in the comments. Every voice matters. Every story deserves to be told. This is Crime Shade, and we will continue to uncover the stories that the world should never forget. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, monsters don't always hide in the dark.